The throne room remained frozen in shocked silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Princess Lyra had just challenged the Emperor himself in front of the entire noble court. Such a thing had never happened before. The Emperor studied Lyra with his cold gray eyes. She was different now. The frightened girl who had left the palace a year ago was gone. In her place stood a woman with fire in her eyes and steel in her spine. "You dare to give me conditions?" the Emperor asked, his voice deadly quiet. Lyra did not flinch. "I do, because I have something your empire desperately needs. The secret to human compatibility. The key to saving our dying bloodlines." The whispers in the room grew louder. Everyone knew the truth that nobody spoke about. Valen fertility rates had been dropping for centuries. Fewer and fewer children were being born. Scientists had tried everything, but nothing worked. The empire was slowly dying from within. "The humans," Lyra continued, "have solved a problem we could not solve for 1,000 years. Their genetics can reawaken dormant reproductive systems. I am living proof." She held up baby Hannah so everyone could see. The child opened her beautiful eyes, glowing with violet and brown light mixed together. She was healthy and strong, a perfect blend of two species. "This is not just my daughter," Lyra declared. "This is the future of our empire. If you work with humanity instead of treating them like animals, you can save the Velen species." Princess Viola pushed forward from the crowd. Her face was red with anger. "This is nonsense. We cannot depend on those primitive creatures. We are the greatest empire in the galaxy." "An empire that is dying," Lyra shot back. "Look around you, Vala. Look at how few children are in this room. Look at how many noble families have no heirs. Our greatness means nothing if we disappear from history." The nobles began to murmur among themselves. They knew Lyra was telling the truth. Many of them had struggled for decades to have children. Many had given up hope entirely. Diane stepped forward. The guards moved to stop him, but the Emperor raised his hand. "Let the human speak," he commanded. Doheen cleared his throat. He was terrified, but he refused to show it. These were the people who had mocked his wife for her entire life. These were the people who had sent her away like garbage. He would not show weakness in front of them. "Your Majesty," he began, "I am just a farmer. I do not understand politics or science. But I understand one thing very well. Every creature in the universe wants to survive. Every creature wants to see their children grow strong." He looked at the nobles around him. "Humans are young. We are weak compared to your technology. We live short lives and make many mistakes. But we never give up. We adapt. We change. We find ways to keep going when everything seems hopeless." He pointed at Hannah. "My daughter exists because life found a way. Your doctors said it was impossible. Your scientists said it could never happen. But here she is, alive and healthy and beautiful." The Emperor leaned forward on his throne. "What exactly are you proposing, human?" Daoyun took a deep breath. "Partnership, not conquest, not experimentation. True partnership between our species. Humans will share our genetic adaptability. In return, you share your technology. Together, we can build something greater than either of us could alone." The throne room erupted into chaos. Some nobles shouted in agreement. Others screamed in protest. Viola and her brothers looked like they wanted to kill Doyon with their bare hands. But the Emperor remained silent, thinking. Finally, he raised his hand again. The room fell quiet. "The human speaks with wisdom beyond his years," the Emperor said slowly. "Perhaps we have underestimated his species." Viola stepped forward desperately. "Father, you cannot be considering this. Partnering with humans would destroy our reputation. The other empires would laugh at us. The emperor turned to look at his daughter. For the first time, his eyes showed something other than cold calculation. They showed anger. "They already laugh at us," he said harshly. "They laugh at our dying bloodlines. They laugh at our empty nurseries. They wait like predators for our empire to collapse so they can pick apart the pieces." He stood from his throne, his whole body moving with surprising strength. "I have ruled this empire for 300 years. I have watched our population shrink with each generation. I have buried more of my children than I can count. And now, finally, I see a solution standing before me." He walked down from the throne and approached Lyra. She stood her ground as he stopped directly in front of her. "You were discarded," he said quietly. "Treated as worthless. Sent away as a joke. And yet, you returned with the one thing our empire needs most. A future." He reached out and gently touched Hana's tiny hand. The baby looked up at him with curious eyes. For a moment, something soft appeared in the old emperor's face. Something almost like hope. "The child will not be harmed," he declared. "She will be raised as a princess of the Velen Empire with full rights and privileges." Then he turned to Dohyun. "You will serve as the first human ambassador to our empire. Your world will be given protected status. No Velen will be allowed to harm or exploit Earth-7 or any human colony." Finally, he looked at Lyra. "And you, my forgotten granddaughter, will lead this new partnership. You understand both worlds. You are the bridge we need." Lyra felt tears running down her cheeks. After a lifetime of rejection, she was finally being seen. Finally being valued. Not despite her connection to humans, but because of it. "I accept," she said softly. "But I have one more condition." The emperor raised an eyebrow. "You push your luck, child." Lyra smiled. "I want Vila and her brothers to publicly apologize. Not to me, but to every Velen who was ever called worthless. Every Velen who was ever discarded because they could not have children. They deserve to know that their empire sees them as valuable." Vila's face turned white. Being forced to apologize was the greatest humiliation possible for Velen nobility. She opened her mouth to protest, but the emperor spoke first. "Done." The court watched in stunned silence as Vila, Kale, and Damon were forced to kneel before the crowd and speak words of apology. Their voices shook with rage and shame. But they had no choice. The emperor's word was law. That night, Lyra and Dohyun were given the finest quarters in the palace. It was far larger than their little farmhouse, with windows that looked out at the entire galaxy. But they did not care about the luxury. They sat together on the bed, with Hana sleeping peacefully between them. "Can you believe this is real?" Dohyun whispered. Lyra shook her head. "A year ago, I was crying alone in a tiny room, wishing I could disappear. Now I'm going to change the galaxy." Dohyun took her hand. "You already changed one thing. You changed my world completely." Lyra leaned her head on his shoulder. "What do you think will happen next?" Dohyun looked out at the stars. "I think humanity is about to become very important to the galaxy. I think everything is going to change." He looked down at his sleeping daughter. "And I think this little girl is going to grow up in a universe where nobody is called worthless. Where every person matters." Lyra kissed his cheek. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me when nobody else did. For loving me when I thought I was unlovable. For giving me a miracle." Dohyun smiled, that warm, kind smile that had captured her heart on the very first day. "You gave me the miracle. I was just a lonely farmer. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to believe in magic." Hana stirred in her sleep, making a small sound. Both parents looked at her with overwhelming love. The cruel joke had ended. But the real story was just beginning. Humanity was no longer just a primitive species on the edge of the galaxy. They were partners in the greatest empire ever known. They were the key to survival. They were miraculous dot and somewhere on Earth 7. In a small village surrounded by green fields, the people were watching the stars. They had heard the news. One of their own was now an ambassador. One of their own had changed everything. Grandmother Park smiled up at the night sky. I always knew humans were special, she said to no one in particular. We just needed someone to give us a chance to prove it. And across the galaxy, that chance had finally come. The baby was born on a warm spring morning. She came into the world with a loud cry and tiny, fists waving in the air. Dr. Wan caught her gently and placed her in Lyra's arms. It is a girl, he announced with a proud smile. Lyra looked down at her daughter and felt a love so powerful it almost hurt. The baby had her mother's silver skin, but it was warmer, more golden. She had her father's brown eyes, but they sparkled with violet light. She was perfect, a beautiful blend of two worlds. Hannah, Lyra whispered. My little flower. Do-hyun stood beside them, tears streaming down his face. He touched his daughter's tiny hand, and her fingers wrapped around his. In that moment, he knew he would do anything to protect this child. The village celebrated for 3 days. Everyone came to see the miracle baby. Grandmother Park declared Hannah the most beautiful child she had ever seen. Taeyang promised to teach her everything he knew about games and adventures. Jisoo and Myra brought enough gifts to fill the entire house. For a few weeks, life was peaceful. But Lyra knew it could not last. The Velen Empire had eyes everywhere. Sooner or later, they would come dot. She was right dot 1 month after Hannah was born. A massive silver ship appeared in the sky above the village. It was a Velen royal transport. The villagers had never seen anything so large or so frightening. The ship landed in the fields outside the village. A ramp lowered, and soldiers in crystal armor marched out. Behind them came Princess Vela, her face twisted with cold anger. Lyra stood at the door of her home, holding Hannah close. Do-hyun stood beside her, his fists clenched. Cousin, Vela said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. What a surprise. When we sent you here, we expected you to suffer. Instead, you have performed a miracle. What do you want, Vela? Lyra asked calmly, Vela's eyes fixed on the baby. The child. The Empire wants to study it. A half-human, half-Velen baby that should not exist. Scientists across the galaxy are desperate to understand how this happened. Lyra held Hannah tighter. She is not an experiment. She is my daughter. Vela laughed coldly. You think you have a choice? The Emperor himself has ordered this. You will come back to the palace with the child. The human will stay here where he belongs. Do-hyun stepped forward, his eyes burning with anger. You will not take my family anywhere. Vela looked at him like he was an insect. Silence, primitive. This does not concern you. But Do-hyun did not step back. Everything about my wife and daughter concerns me. I do not care who you are. I do not care about your empire. You will not touch them. For a moment, Vela was stunned. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever shown such disrespect to Velen royalty. She raised her hand, ready to order her soldiers to attack, but then the villagers began to gather. Grandmother Park hobbled forward with her walking stick. You heard the man. Leave this family alone. Dr. Wan stepped up beside her. This baby was born in our village. She is one of us. Jisoo and Mira came next, holding hands. Then Taeyang, with his small fists raised like a fighter. One by one, every person in the village came to stand behind Do-hyun. They were farmers and shopkeepers, doctors and teachers, old people and young children. They had no weapons. They had no armor. They had no power against a Velen army, but they stood together anyway. Viola stared at them in disbelief. These primitive humans were defying the greatest empire in the galaxy. They were risking their lives for a woman who was not even their species. "You are all insane," she whispered. "My soldiers could destroy this entire village in seconds." Do-hyun looked at her steadily. "Then do it. Kill us all. But know that the galaxy will hear about it. They will hear how the mighty Velen Empire murdered innocent farmers just to steal a baby. Is that the story you want told?" Vila hesitated. She had not expected this. She had expected Lyra to be alone and helpless. She had expected a quick grab and a fast return. She had not expected an entire village to fight back. Before she could decide what to do, Lyra stepped forward. Her daughter was still in her arms, sleeping peacefully despite all the noise. "I will go with you," Lyra said quietly. "No." Do-hyun grabbed her arm. "You cannot trust her." Lyra looked at him with loving eyes. "I know. But if I do not go, she will destroy everyone here. I cannot let that happen. These people protected me. Now I must protect them." She kissed Do-hyun softly. "Take care of the farm. I will come back. I promise." Then she turned to Vila. "I have one condition. My husband comes with me. Not as a prisoner. As a diplomat representing the human species." Vila opened her mouth to refuse, but Lyra interrupted her. "The Empire wants to study human genetics, do they not? You will need a living human subject. Do-hyun is the father of this miracle baby. He is more valuable to your scientists than anyone else on this planet." It was a clever move. Lyra knew the Empire cared more about science than pride. They would accept any excuse to bring Do-hyun along if it meant better research. Vila's eyes narrowed, but she nodded slowly. "Fine, the human can come. But he will be treated as what he is. A specimen." Lyra did not argue. She just needed to get Do-hyun into the palace. Together, they could fight. Separated, they would both be destroyed. The journey to the Velen homeworld took 5 days. Lyra and Do-hyun were kept in separate rooms, but they were not harmed. The soldiers watched them constantly, but they did not touch the baby. When they finally arrived at the palace, Lyra felt a cold chill run through her body. This was the place she had spent her entire childhood. This was the place where she had been mocked and tortured and called worthless. But this time, she was not alone. She had Do-hyun. She had Hannah. She had love. The doors to the throne room opened, and Lyra walked in. Every noble in the Empire was there. Thousands of silver faces stared at her with shock and disbelief. And at the center of the room, on a massive crystal throne, sat the Emperor himself. He was old and thin, with cold gray eyes that had never shown warmth to anyone. He looked at Lyra, then at the baby in her arms, then at the human walking beside her. "The empty one returns," he said in a voice like ice. "And she brings a miracle." Lyra lifted her chin and stood tall. She was no longer the scared girl who had hidden in her room. She was a mother, a wife, a survivor. "I have returned," she said clearly, so everyone could hear. "And I have brought proof that your scientists were wrong. I was never empty. I was simply waiting for the right partner. A human partner." The room exploded into whispers. Nobles looked at each other in disbelief. Some stared at Do-hyun with new eyes, seeing not a primitive animal, but a creature with power they could not understand. The Emperor raised his hand for silence. His eyes were fixed on Hannah. "The child must be studied," he declared. Lyra shook her head. "The child will not be touched. She is not a specimen. She is a princess of 2 empires, and she will be treated as such." For the first time in years, someone had dared to challenge the Emperor, and deep in his cold heart, he felt something he had not felt in centuries: fear. 6 months had passed since Lyra arrived on Earth 7. The small farm had become her home. The simple wooden house had become her palace, and Doing had become her whole world. They were married in a small ceremony by the river. Grandmother Park cooked a huge feast. Young Taiyang carried the flower basket. Juzu and Mira cried happy tears. The whole village came to celebrate. Lyra wore a simple white dress that Mira had made for her. She did not have jewels or a crown. She did not have royal guards or expensive decorations. But she had something better. She had people who loved her. When Doyin took her hand and promised to love her forever, Lyra felt like the richest person in the universe. Life continued peacefully after the wedding. They worked the fields together, cooked meals together, and watched the stars together every night. Lyra told Dohyun about the distant galaxies and the planets she had seen from her palace window. Dohyun told her about Earth's history and the dreams humans had about reaching those stars. One day, Dohyun said, humans will travel to those stars. We are young as a species, but we are dreamers, and dreamers never give up. Lyra smiled at his words. Humans were considered primitive by the rest of the galaxy, but they did not act like a dying species. They acted like a species that was just beginning. It was during the 7th month that Lyra began to feel strange. At first, she thought she was sick. She felt tired all the time. Her stomach was upset every morning. Food that she used to love now made her feel ill. Maybe you caught a human sickness, Dohyun said with worry. We should see the village doctor. The village doctor was an old man named Dr. Wan. He had studied medicine in the main human cities before retiring to this quiet village. When he examined Lyra, he looked confused. Your biology is different from humans, he admitted. I cannot be sure what is wrong, but your symptoms remind me of something very specific. What is it? Lyra asked nervously. Dr. Wan looked at her with curious eyes. In humans, these symptoms often mean pregnancy. But you told me that is impossible for your species. Lyra's heart stopped. It is impossible. I was born without the ability to conceive. Every Velen doctor confirmed it. Dr. Wan scratched his chin thoughtfully. Well, let me run some tests. Human and Velen biology are different enough that perhaps something unexpected is happening. He took samples of her blood and ran them through his simple medical machines. Lyra waited with Dohyun by her side. Her husband held her hand tightly, his face filled with concern. After an hour, Dr. Wan returned. His face was pale with shock. I checked the results 3 times, he said slowly. I cannot explain it, but there is a new life growing inside you. You are pregnant. The room went silent. Lyra could not breathe. Her mind refused to accept what she was hearing. She had lived her whole life being told she was empty, broken, worthless. Every Velen doctor had said the same thing. Her reproductive system was dead. She could never have children. That is impossible, she whispered. Dr. Wan shook his head. I am looking at the results right now. There is definitely a baby growing inside you. About 2 months along, I would guess. Dohyun turned to Lyra with tears in his eyes. Lyra, is this real? Are we going to have a baby? Lyra started crying. Not tears of sadness, but tears of joy. Tears of disbelief. Tears of a miracle she never thought possible. I do not understand, she said through her tears. How is this happening? Dr. Wan began researching everything he could find about Velen biology. With Lyra's permission, he contacted human scientists in the main cities. They had studied alien species for decades, trying to understand the differences between all the creatures in the galaxy. After weeks of research, they finally found an answer. It is the human genetic code, Dr. Wan explained excitedly. Human DNA is incredibly adaptable. It can bond with almost any genetic material in the galaxy. When you and Dohyun became close, his genes triggered something in your body. They activated parts of your reproductive system that were dormant, not dead. Lyra listened in amazement. The Velen doctors had been wrong all along. She was not broken. Her body was simply waiting for the right trigger. And that trigger was human. Humans have something that no other species in the galaxy has, Dr. Wang continued. Your scientists call it primitive, but we call it potential. Our genes do not just reproduce. They adapt. They evolve. They find ways to survive against all odds. Doyen held Lyra close as the doctor spoke. Both of them were shaking with emotion. So our baby, Doyen said, will be half Velen and half human? Dr. Wan nodded. Yes, the first of its kind. A true child of two worlds. The news spread through the village quickly. Everyone was overjoyed. Grandmother Park began knitting baby clothes immediately. Taiyang asked if he could be the baby's big brother. Jishu and Mira brought gifts every day. But Lyra knew that this news would eventually reach the Velen Empire. And when it did, everything would change. For now, she tried not to think about it. She focused on the life growing inside her. She placed her hand on her stomach every night and whispered words of love to her unborn child. You are a miracle, she told the baby. You were supposed to be impossible, but you are here anyway, just like your father's people. You never give up. Dohan watched her with pride and love. He had known from the moment he met Lyra that she was special, not because she was a princess, not because she was an alien, but because she had a heart full of love that had never been given a chance to bloom. Now that love was creating new life. The months passed quickly. Lyra's belly grew round. The baby kicked and moved inside her, reminding her every day that the impossible had become real. Dr. Wan monitored her closely. The pregnancy was healthy. The baby was developing normally. There were no complications, no dangers. It was as if the universe itself was protecting this miracle child. One night, Lyra and Doyun lay under the stars. Her belly was now very big, and she could not work in the fields anymore. But she was not sad. She was the happiest she had ever been. What should we name the baby? Dohyun asked softly. Lyra thought for a moment. If it is a girl, I want to name her Hannah. It means flower in your language, right? Because she grew from a seed of love. Dohyun smiled. And if it is a boy? Then you choose, Lyra said. Dohyun looked up at the stars. Bile, it means star. Because he came from the stars, just like his mother. Lyra leaned against her husband and closed her eyes. She did not know what the future would bring. She did not know how her people would react. But she knew one thing for certain. This baby was proof that love could conquer anything, even impossibility. And somewhere in the distant Velen Palace, a message was being received. A report from a human scientist who had shared the news with the wrong person. Princess Vela read the message 3 times. Her hands were shaking. Her face was white with rage and disbelief. The empty one was pregnant. The prank had gone terribly, terribly wrong. The palace of the Velen Empire stood tall among the stars. Its walls were made of crystal that shone like diamonds. Inside, thousands of royal family members lived in comfort and power. But not everyone in the palace was happy. Princess Lyra sat alone in her small room. Her room was far from the main halls, hidden in a corner that nobody visited. She looked out of her window at the distant galaxies. Her silver skin glowed softly in the starlight, and her large violet eyes were filled with sadness. Lyra was different from other Velen royals. She was born without the ability to have children. In the Velen Empire, this was considered the worst curse. A royal who could not produce heirs was worthless. Her own mother refused to look at her. Her father pretended she did not exist. And her cousins made her life a living nightmare. Look, the empty one is watching the stars again, said Princess Vela. walking past Lyra's door with a cruel smile. Vela was Lyra's cousin and her greatest enemy. She had everything Lyra did not have. Beauty that everyone admired. Power that everyone feared. And most importantly, she could have children. Lyra said nothing. She had learned long ago that words only made things worse. She simply closed her eyes and wished she was somewhere else. Anywhere else. That night, Vela called a secret meeting with her two brothers, Prince Kale and Prince Damon. They gathered in Vela's private chamber, drinking expensive wine and laughing about their latest schemes. "I am bored," Vela announced. "We need some entertainment." Kale smiled darkly. "What do you have in mind, sister?" Vela's eyes sparkled with mischief. "I have been thinking about our dear cousin Lyra. She sits in her room all day, feeling sorry for herself. Perhaps we should give her a purpose in life." Damon laughed. What purpose could the empty one possibly serve? Vela pulled out a document from her desk. "The Galactic Council requires us to send a diplomatic bride to one of the new colony planets. It is meant to strengthen our relationship with lesser species." And? Kale asked. And Vela continued. "There is a small human colony on a planet called Earth 7. They have requested a Velan bride for one of their citizens. A farmer, I believe." The three cousins burst into laughter. Humans were considered the lowest species in the galaxy. They were weak, short-lived, and primitive. Their technology was thousands of years behind the Velan Empire. Sending a princess to marry a human farmer was the greatest insult possible. "You want to send Lyra to marry a human?" Damon asked, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. "That is brilliant." "Think about it," Vela said. "She cannot bring shame to any important family because she cannot have children anyway. And when she returns, broken and humiliated from living among those primitives, we will have endless entertainment." The plan was set in motion the very next day. Vela used her influence to convince the Emperor that sending Lyra was the perfect solution. After all, she argued, Lyra was useless in the palace. At least this way, she could serve some purpose. The Emperor agreed without hesitation. He did not care about Lyra's feelings. To him, she was just a problem that needed to go away. When Lyra received the news, she felt her heart break into a million pieces. She was being sent to marry a human, a primitive creature from a backwater planet. It was the final proof that her family saw her as nothing but garbage to be thrown away. "You will leave tomorrow," the messenger told her coldly. "Pack only what you need. Humans do not understand our technology anyway." That night, Lyra cried until she had no more tears. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her silver skin, her violet eyes, her delicate features. She was a princess of the greatest empire in the galaxy. And she was being sent to live with animals. The journey to Earth 7 took 3 days. Lyra sat in a small transport ship, watching the stars pass by. She had never left the palace before. Despite her sadness, she could not help but feel a small spark of curiosity. What would this new world be like? What would her human husband be like? The transport landed in a green valley surrounded by mountains. Lyra stepped out and immediately felt different. The air was fresh and clean. The sky was a beautiful shade of blue. Birds sang in the trees and flowers bloomed everywhere. It was nothing like the cold crystal halls of the palace. A man stood waiting for her near a small wooden house. He was tall for a human, with kind brown eyes and messy black hair. His skin was tanned from working in the sun, and his hands were rough from labor. He wore simple clothes covered in dirt. This was Do-Yun, her husband. Lyra expected him to bow or show fear. Instead, he smiled warmly and walked toward her. "Welcome," he said in simple galactic common. "I am Do-Yun. You must be tired from your journey. Please, come inside. I made soup." Lyra did not know what to say. No one had ever offered her soup before. No one had ever smiled at her like that. No one had ever looked at her without disgust or pity. She followed him into the small house, her heart confused and uncertain. The house was tiny compared to her room in the palace, but it was warm. There was a fire burning in the corner. There were colorful blankets on the chairs. There were flowers in a vase on the table. Doyen pulled out a chair for her. "Please, sit. The soup is almost ready." Lyra sat down slowly. She looked around the simple room and felt something strange. For the first time in her life, she did not feel like a burden. She did not feel unwanted. She felt like a guest. Back in the Velen Palace, Vala and her brothers watched through a hidden camera. They laughed at the small house and the dirty farmer. They laughed at Lyra's confused face. "This is perfect," Vala said. "She will be miserable. And when she comes crawling back, we will remind her of this moment forever." But as they watched Doyun serve soup to Lyra with gentle hands, none of them noticed the small smile that appeared on Lyra's face. It was the first real smile she had smiled in years. The cruel joke had begun, but it would not end the way anyone expected. The first morning on Earth 7 was strange for Lyra. She woke up to the sound of birds singing outside her window. In the palace, she had always woken up to silence. Cold, empty silence. Doyen had given her the only bedroom in the house. He slept on a small bed in the corner of the main room. When Lyra came out of the bedroom, she found him already awake. He was cooking something over the fire. "Good morning," he said with a warm smile. "Did you sleep well?" Lyra nodded slowly. She had actually slept better than she had in years. The bed was soft and the house was warm. There were no servants watching her every move. No cousins waiting to mock her. "I made breakfast," Do-hyun continued. "It is not fancy, but it will give you energy." He placed a plate in front of her. There were eggs, some vegetables, and fresh bread. Lyra looked at the food with confusion. In the palace, servants had always brought her food. She had never seen anyone cook for her personally. "You cooked this yourself?" she asked. "Of course," Do-hyun replied. "Who else would cook it?" Lyra did not know how to answer. In her world, royals never touched food until it was ready to eat. Cooking was for servants. But here, there were no servants. There was only Do-hai and Dod. She took a small bite of the eggs. They were simple but delicious. Much better than the complicated palace food that always tasted like nothing. "It is good," she said quietly. Do-hyun's face lit up with happiness. "I am glad. My mother taught me to cook before she passed away. She always said good food brings people together." After breakfast, Do-hyun went outside to work in his fields. Lyra watched him from the window. He worked hard under the hot sun, planting seeds and pulling weeds. Sweat ran down his face, but he never stopped smiling. For 3 days, Lyra just watched. She did not know what to do with herself. In the palace, she had spent her days reading or staring at the stars. Here, there were no books in her language, and the stars only came out at night. On the 4th day, she finally stepped outside. Doyen looked up from his work, surprised. "Princess, you should not be out here. The sun might hurt your skin." Lyra shook her head. "I want to help." Do-hyun stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled that warm smile again. "Okay, come, I will teach you." He showed her how to plant seeds in the soil. It was simple work, but Lyra had never done anything like it before. Her hands got dirty. Her back hurt from bending down. But with each seed she planted, she felt something strange growing inside her. Pride. "You are doing well," Do-hyun said encouragingly. "These seeds will grow into beautiful vegetables. You will see." Days turned into weeks. Lyra learned many things from Do-hyun. She learned how to plant and water crops. She learned how to cook simple meals. She learned how to wash clothes in the river and hang them to dry in the sun. But most importantly, she learned how to laugh. Do-yoon had a gift for making her smile. He told funny stories about his childhood. He made silly faces when she looked sad. He sang old human songs while he worked. Even though his voice was terrible. One evening, they sat outside watching the sunset. The sky turned orange and pink and purple. It was the most beautiful thing Lyra had ever seen. "In my palace," she said softly, "I never watched sunsets. I did not know they could be so beautiful." Do-hyun looked at her with gentle eyes. "Your palace must have been very grand." "It was," Lyra admitted. "But it was cold. Everyone there hated me. They called me the empty one because I cannot have children." She expected Do-hyun to look at her with pity or disgust. But he didn't either. He simply nodded and said, "That must have been very lonely." Tears filled Lyra's eyes. No one had ever understood her pain so simply and so completely. "Why are you so kind to me?" she asked. "You know what I am. You know I am worthless to my people." Do-hyun shook his head firmly. "You are not worthless. A person's value is not decided by whether they can have children. It is decided by who they are inside." He pointed at the seeds they had planted together. Small green plants were starting to grow from the soil. "You helped these seeds grow. That means you can create life. Maybe not the way your people expected, but in your own way." Lyra looked at the tiny plants. They were so small and fragile, but they were alive. And she had helped make them. Something inside her heart began to change that night. The cold walls she had built around herself started to crack. Weeks turned into months. The village around them began to accept Lyra. At first, the humans were afraid of her. Her silver skin and violet eyes were strange to them. But when they saw her working in the fields alongside Do-hyun, they began to warm up. An old woman named Grandmother Park brought them fresh fruit from her garden. A young boy named Taeyang asked Lyra to tell him stories about the stars. A couple named Jisoo and Mira invited them for dinner every week. Lyra had never had friends before. She did not know how to act around people who were kind for no reason. But slowly, she learned. She learned that friendship was not about power or status. It was about caring for each other. One night, a terrible storm hit the village. The wind blew hard, and rain fell like rivers from the sky. Lyra was afraid. She had never experienced such weather. Do-hyun held her hand and said, "Do not worry. I will keep you safe." And she believed him. They sat together through the storm, listening to the thunder and watching the lightning. Do-hyun told her stories about brave humans who faced storms and survived. He told her about his parents, who had died when he was young, and how he had built this farm all by himself. "Were you not lonely?" Lyra asked. Do-hyun thought for a moment. "Sometimes. But I always believed that someday someone would come. Someone who would understand me." He looked at her with those kind brown eyes, and Lyra felt her heart beat faster. "I think I understand you," she whispered. Do-hyun smiled. "I think I understand you too." That night, something magical happened. Not magic from technology or alien power, but the oldest magic in the universe. The magic of two lonely hearts finding each other. Lyra realized she did not want to go back to the palace. She did not want to return to the cold halls and cruel cousins. She wanted to stay here in this small house, with this simple farmer who saw her true worth. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt loved, and love, as she would soon discover, had powers that even the greatest empire in the galaxy could not understand. In the palace, Vela had stopped watching the cameras weeks ago. The joke was boring now. Lyra was just doing farm work and living a simple life. There was nothing funny about it, but if Vela had kept watching, she would have seen something that would wipe the smile from her face forever. She would have seen Lyra happy. And happiness. For someone like Lyra, was the beginning of a miracle.